Hello and welcome back to Sabbatical Stories. I'm your host Bex Thomas, a career transition and sabbatical coach. I'm back in France and enjoying the early signs of spring. We have colour starting to pop up in the garden and I'm back knee deep in renovations after escaping the winter. This podcast exists to inspire courage and normalise taking a break from your career, and we would love it if you could please follow, rate and share the show. It helps more people discover these stories. Today's guest is Mark Hughes, leadership coach, facilitator and former CEO. His perspective on returning to work after a sabbatical is refreshingly nuanced. Rather than some massive dramatic epiphany or complete career overhaul, Mark explores the power of curiosity, reflection and embracing mixed feelings as part of the return to work journey. We dive into the emotional reality of re-entering a role, why sabbaticals don't always need to spark radical change, and how deeper self-awareness can transform the way you approach your career. Let's dive in. I think you're going to find this conversation both grounding and insightful. Deep down, you've tried, dig deep, search wide, enjoy your climb, it's all for you. Hi Mark, and welcome to Sabbatical Stories. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and be a guest.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this.
I stumbled across, I think, your post on LinkedIn about your reflections on your sabbatical. And so I am so intrigued to dive into all of that. But for our audience, could you please give us a bit of an introduction to you, Mark, and also your sabbatical story and what it meant to you?
Right, yeah. So I'm Mark Hughes. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a friend. I'm a trainer, a mentor. I'm a facilitator from time to time. And I guess I introduce myself in that way because in some ways I do feel defined by my relationships. Relationships are a core value of mine. And I think what the sabbatical meant to me was in some ways living my values in terms of not just relationships, because as we'll, I'm sure, talk about, a lot of my time was spent connecting with friends and family, but also other core values such as just balance. Trying to live a balanced life, trying to live an equitable life, really valuing my health and also fun as well. And in some ways, my sabbatical really tried to embrace all the core values that I guess I tried to live by.
And what I love is that there were obviously two birthdays, your own birthday and also I presume your business birthday, happened either sort of before or during the sabbatical. So what I really would love to understand is why then? What was the why behind the sabbatical?
A lot of people have a cursory look at it. I feel like my timeline, you think, oh, well, you turn 50, your company MCH turned 20. That's got to be the trigger. But to be honest, I wouldn't say it was premeditated in that way. I mean, I've had quite a meandering career, and one of my former past lives was as a research chemist. And so I think since then I've always enjoyed experiments, treating light series of experiments, and whether that be little things like, joining a choir or doing an acting class or whatever it may be, or bigger things like a sabbatical, it's still an experiment. And I think experiments are what makes life really interesting, what you learn from. So in some ways, yes, it was just, almost the big experiment for 2025. And, and a mantra I have, if you don't have a goal, you'll never know. And so there was, I think, that a naive enthusiasm that I still have furnished the desire to have a sabbatical. I mean, I think the only other thing that I'd add is that back in 2020, my partner at the time, she was actually I think she took a 6-month sabbatical. And I did, I suppose, accompany her on some of that sabbatical. So we did a bit of traveling, we did a bit of volunteering. And then I decided to do just a little bit of work shadowing, actually. So I just work shadowed a really diverse range of people, from clinical psychologists to farmers to builders to CEOs. But it was only over probably about 3 weeks, my kind of mini sabbatical. But I think that planted the seed, that whetted the appetite.
Had you thought about taking a break before that seed was planted?
I don't think in terms of a formal sabbatical, because in the UK where I'm based, it's really quite rare. Unless you're in academia, you don't hear too many people take sabbaticals. I think in the likes of Australia, where you're based, with long service leave and things like that, it's more common. That said, I run a people development company, so a lot of training and mentoring. And as a result, August is often quite a quiet time for me because people are on holiday. And certainly when my children were growing up, it was a good time for me to just to take a really good chunk of time off. So I think for several years I had the bulk of August off as a proper break. And as part of my own professional development, I try and take a couple of book weeks, one at the beginning of the year and one at the end of the year. So I literally just take myself away and explore topics, whether it be books or podcasts, but just take myself away from the day to day and invest in my own development. So I think for a long time, I've had periods of, definite breaks and taking myself off. But no, in terms of actually a formal sabbatical, no, I guess it hadn't been on my radar for a while.
And so that was the seed that was planted in 2020. Yep. We fast forward to 2025 when it came a reality. What were the type of things you did to plan then? And did it take that full sort of 5 years, or?
The planning in some ways was quite easy. I mean, I think there was an element of almost just focusing on the W's, the what's, the who's, the why's, the where's, the when's, and really keeping it at quite a high level. I mean, I think the first W is, a W at the end is how long. And I think 3 months was, in some ways, a pragmatic decision. And I felt that was the most I could afford, to put it bluntly.
From a financial perspective, as well as time off work and
from a financial perspective, I felt that was the longest I could afford. But equally, that was long enough to really feel that it was going to be a complete rest. So I have two, I was about to say children, but Luke turned 18 this year. Eva, my youngest, is 15, so they're kind of young adults. I'm divorced from their mum. So there was an element of just checking with my ex-wife, Sophie, that she was able to cover some of the activities that I would be doing during my sabbatical. But I think once I'd worked out, this is the time frame, and yes, it's going to be possible from just a practical childcare point of view, there was an element of then just, I suppose, being quite proactive. Probably about a year out, I started to inform some of my repeat clients that, yes, I was going to be taking this chunk of time off. So if there was any work that needed to be done, then yes, it would have to be around, these dates. But that was really the only significant planning I had to do. Because as, we'll speak about in terms of what I was doing, there was quite a bit of flexibility within the 3 months as to when I could do what I wanted to do. I think a theme that I wanted to characterize the sabbatical, which was fluidity. As a trainer, as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator, you have to be responsive to your client, and that requires you to sometimes be very structured in the way that you handle things. And so I wanted to have that ability to actually remove as much structure as I could. Be fluid.
It's definitely a challenge that so many bring up around that fluidity of not having to be somewhere or not having to do something or not having to, and also catching themselves almost creating this structure around the break that just it sort of replaces work. Oh, I must do yoga at this time, I must do this at this time, I must do this, and then it sort of becomes just this, you're working at the sabbatical. And what about the intention for the time off? Like, what was the intention, and how did you then sort of create what you were going to be doing to satisfy that intention?
So I think when people word of the fact that I was going on sabbatical, they were often, that was a common question, what are you hoping to get out of it? And I think that what I was most interested in actually was how would I feel and what would I be thinking when I went back to work? Now I wasn't expecting a massive epiphany or a Damascene moment where I would feel, oh well, my life is needs to go in a completely different direction. I want to be a dairy farmer now, or an astronaut. I didn't expect that. I was very happy, and I feel my work is very purposeful. But I was intrigued as to whether I would I be absolutely rubbing my hands with itching to get back into it? Would I be actually, no, I wish I could have longer? Would there be resistance? Or would there be just, I guess, without, but will be ambivalent in the best possible way that, yes, it was nice, but I'm also come to, I think that's what I was most interested in. And I think what I did to ensure that reflection would be perhaps as useful as possible was just have a complete break from emails And so my company, because my company is just me, I'm the sole employee. My company did shut with my sabbatical. And it was quite interesting. Some people were really quite surprised that I didn't check my emails at all during that.
Did you not at all?
No, not at all.
Wow, fair play. That is huge.
Yes, no work emails were checked at all. And actually, even my personal emails, I had quite significant chunks of time where, I just didn't check those either. So
How did you find that? Was that hard?
No, it's a short answer. And I think part of the reason is, I am a real Luddite, and technophobe, and that's a powerful combination. So actually, it was more of a relief. Quite a while ago, I realized that particularly in my line of work, I'm not important enough that anything of real significance is going to happen. It's not as if I don't check an email, somebody's going to die or, I'm just not important enough for emails to be that urgent.
And you mentioned, I think, on your post on LinkedIn that you were not on LinkedIn at all. Were you on any social media or like technology from a personal perspective, or was it a total detox?
So again, in keeping with my Luddite technophobe persona, I mean, it probably won't surprise you. I'm not on Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account. I never tweeted or whatever, and Instagram. I'm just not on any of those platforms at all. So there was nothing actually to detox from in that regard. So no, it was really just email. But even just the internet, I did have chunks of time off that. But again, that's something that I've done for many years now. Particularly, for example, I mentioned the 2 book weeks that I go on. Again, there are 2 occasions where, I certainly don't check work emails. My phone is often off for big chunks of each day, and I won't check. But it was so this was more a case of just having the luxury and the privilege of doing it for longer.
Yeah, for 3 months. And we'll get on to what you felt when you returned, and how that lived up to any kind of expectation. But talk us through what you actually did on your 3 months off.
Yes. So it started actually with, I suppose, an early birthday party. So one of my strongest friendship group is actually friends from primary school and secondary school. And so we were all turning 50 this year, and we're all spread across the world now. And despite all hailing from southwest Scotland, we're all over the world. And so we decided, because it was our 50th year, we'd have a big one. And so we met up in Morzine in France.
Oh, how wonderful.
And half of us, including myself, we actually drove there. So it was a lovely road trip there and road trip back. So about 5-6 days in Morzine with friends. And that was just a lovely way of starting the sabbatical, with a proper holiday with people that I love, and it was just, a great way of starting that. And then on the way back, I was dropped off in Cali, and I did a week's volunteering there to assist refugees who are currently stranded there. And then not long after, I went on a 10-day silent course. A lot of people would say 10-day retreat, but it's interesting that the organisers don't label it as a retreat. And I can understand why, because it was a full-on assault of, one way of thinking versus another. It was brutal. Insightfully brutal is probably how I would summarize it. And then after that, there was a fair amount of travel, both within the UK, so to Wales, to Scotland, again, to connect with family and friends. I also was quite keen to just go somewhere new that I'd never been to before. So I took the train to Amsterdam and Rotterdam. So I went to the Netherlands for the first time. And then there was quite a lot of celebrations. So it was my birthday during the sabbatical. My son and daughter also had birthdays, and my partner as well. So there was celebrations, and a couple of weddings I went to as well. And then there was also, I suppose, a mixture of kind of celebration and grieving, in that, look, my eldest son turned 18, and which was a real celebration. And I also went off to university, which is also a real celebration, but also a grieving process of, well, he's no longer here. The dining room table now there's only 2, places, not 3. And so that was, a real, I guess the flip side of having a great relationship with someone is that when they're no longer there, it's hard. And then also, I think the key thing when I was planning, and I, again, in keeping with my Luddite tendencies, I literally just had 3 A4 monthly planners. So, July, August, September, and really just blocking in rest, ensuring that I didn't actually fill every day, because I think that was a pressure. I was aware of the privilege of taking a sabbatical, and, it's almost layering privilege upon privilege. And I'm so privileged. I'm male, white, relatively fit and healthy, born into a loving family, in a country where there was free education, good sanitation, etc. I mean, just the list goes on and on and on. And this felt, at times, an uncomfortable privilege. Do I deserve this time? Could it be used? Could the time, the money that I'm allocated to this, could this be best spent elsewhere or doing something else? And that was probably the only tension I had in formulating what I was going to do. Yes, I had a few coaching sessions about it, actually, and it was very pertinent when they were asking, so what are you going to do? Well, I often started using the word, well, I should really try and think about this, or I should do this. And as soon as you hear the word should, is that, where am I going with this? Because things like, again, perhaps doing some work shadowing that could be relevant in my work, or further research, or even volunteering, or doing some work within organizations, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really glad that I guess took the brave step of, no, this is going to be complete from work. So that was the one mission. And actually, to give myself permission just to rest, because, as I say, having run my own company for 20 years, I think there was an element of just feeling quite tired. I needed a break. Just really allocating both rest and also some days where, waking up and deciding what to do on the day. And just, and sometimes allowing myself, rather than going for a 20-minute walk, which I often do at the start of every day, just keep going. So there's some days when I walk for 2 or 3 hours rather than, 20, 30 minutes, and just allowing that flexibility, as well as doing just some really quite nice and insightful experiments. One week I bought a different newspaper every day, and it was really interesting just seeing, the same news topics were being covered, but just the perspective of the different newspapers. So and then sometimes just, again, having the ability, I live in quite a rural village. I live not far from two cities, Bath Spa and Bristol in the southwest of England, and just allowing myself to pop into a museum or a gallery, just those just simple pleasures were fantastic.
And when you say scheduling rest, what did that look like? Was that pure just nothing planned and go with the flow, or was it, I will rest by doing this?
It's a good question, and I think it perhaps a bit of both, in that so I have a morning routine that involves doing about 5-10 minutes of yoga, also just sitting outside to get natural light as soon as possible with some hot lemon. I think through the day. I reflect on, I guess, my values. I think about who am I going to connect with today, what am I going to give today, how am I going to stay healthy, how am I going to balance, what am I going to learn. There's just some key questions that I ask and answer myself each day. So that, I think, provided a degree of structure, which I always have. But then after that, the short answer is no. It's really just allowing myself, what to do what I felt, and sometimes actually just using a prompt. Okay, so I'll buy a local paper today. They invariably will have a what's on section, and just pick something that's on that. So I used to live in Australia, and I consciously stopped work early before coming back to the UK. And the express intention then was to get bored, because I actually wanted to get bored so that I'd be really energized to return to the UK and seek employment, etc. But I never got bored. I failed miserably because I've never struggled to fill the day, but in some ways, just allowing what I fill it with to emerge on the day is the most fun. And again, in keeping with that theme of just being fluid.
And also, I think I read in your post that the intention was rest, recharge, and was it connection? And so actually,
yes,
that is actually essentially what you're solving for. And of course, by giving yourself permission to rest and to just go with the flow, and almost to be a tourist in your own city, right? Or a sort of visitor in your own backyard. There's something beautiful in that, in actually solving for your intention for the 3 months off.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you have bookended a silent retreat with lots of connection, that your one of your intentions was connection, and then you go and take yourself onto a silent course for 10 days. What was the intention behind that?
Again, this is the naive enthusiasm, Mark Hughes. If you don't have a goal, you'll never know. To be fair, I have been on a few retreats before. I've been on a 7-day, like a meditation introduction to meditation course. I'd also been on, it was a 3-day silent and inverted commas course, and that I say inverted commas because there was, often communication and that people were talking to you. So there was facilitators that would take you through an exercise, and also you had an hour a day in small groups where you could discuss if you wanted to, what you're feeling. So I had some exposure, for want of a better way of putting it, to a retreat setting before. Again, just I think there is use to just take yourself away from your day to day on a relatively frequent basis. But this one, somebody mentioned it to me because it's the Vipassana 10-day silent retreat, and Vipassana runs these courses all over the world. And somebody just mentioned it, and again, I felt it was, well, first of all, it was ripe for doing within a sabbatical, because actually it's 10 days of pretty much full silence, but you arrive the day before and you don't leave until the day after. So it's effectively a 12-day commitment you're allocating to this, and that's, for me, just it would be really challenging to do. And again, the intrigue of what will this be like, because as I say, it's a pretty full-on course. The gong goes at about 4 a.m. The expectation is you're starting to meditate at 5. And then you go right through to about 9 o'clock in the evening. Now, some of that time is, on your own, but again, there are a lot of time where you are in the meditation hall. And as I say, complete silence. Not only that, there's no reading materials. There's nothing to read or write. Obviously, no phones, no radio, no TV. Also, what I really found, probably the hardest, wasn't so much the silence, but feeling confined. Because we were in an old horsing stable, so they so it was quite basic accommodation. There was a little bit of woodland nearby, maybe an acre or so, but that was it. That was it for your exercise. And again, you weren't allowed, in inverted commas, to do any form of running or yoga or anything. It was just light walking around. Again, there was 75 other people in this 1 acre or 1 or 2 acres of woodland, so you never felt you could get away. And that sense of confinement I found really difficult. And I think the biggest insight of that time was, despite their best efforts to remove all forms of distraction, phone, TV, reading, writing materials, the biggest source of distraction is often between your ears. Just what, and you are literally spending 10, 12 hours a day to begin with, really just trying to focus on your breath. So just the inhale of the breath, the exhale of the breath. But I found that so challenging, because at times I was coming up with so fantastical dreams, daydreams, semi-lucid dreams. And I think it's just because my brain was bored. I wanted something to do. And so that really simple act of all you need to do is just think of your breath. How difficult can that be? Well, actually, if you're asked to do it hour after hour after hour, it is quite difficult. So that was one of the big insights. And I think the other was, I wasn't particularly happy for quite a lot of that. There were several days back to back where I just wasn't enjoying it. Generally an optimistic guy, and so to just sit with and having to just sit on your own with that was a real challenge. And because not only is it silent, that you are encouraged to essentially pretend that no one else is there. So it's really almost voluntary solitary confinement. And you can appreciate why solitary confinement is considered a punishment in a lot of cases. Because just that lack of connection was really difficult. And so I'm really glad I did it. It was really insightful, and it was also really really challenging. And so I would do something similar, but not perhaps to that either length, but also I think it was just the intensity of it. And I've been really cautious to recommend it, because I think when you do strip everything back, you don't know what you're going to uncover. And to be fair, they do give you, there's quite a detailed questionnaire that you fill out before being accepted onto the course. And they do make it clear that, if you have any sort of trauma or mental illness at this time, this is not a good idea. It's a challenging process. But I think even if you feel that you are comfortable, because you are getting into that conscious, subconscious realm, you don't know what's going to pop out. Again, in fitting with the desire to do experiments, that was a big experiment, a hard experiment, and a very insightful one.
It's one that has intrigued me for years. And I still feel as though there will be a time, but I also have this preconceived idea that I will feel exactly the same. And I've got a friend who talks about the synergy of unpacking a tent or taking a sleeping bag out of its thing and then trying to get it back in and not being able to try and get, and that's the whole
Yeah.
between the just in your head and between the ears, that long just with yourself, unpacking.
Yeah.
There's stuff that could come out that you can't then put, because you can't undo it,
Yeah.
right? You can't undo the 10 days or rewind. So yeah, fascinating experience.
And it was interesting, right at the end, you could speak to fellow participants. I spoke to maybe 15, 20. And it was interesting, quite a high percentage of them were going through some really quite significant things in their life, whether it was, I'm going through a divorce, or, my partner and I are having a trial separation, or I'm thinking of, emigrating, or I'm thinking of changing careers. And so perhaps, that if I'd been going through something similar, it might have been different.
Yeah.
But I think because my outside world was really quite a happy, enjoyable one, I just wanted to get back to.
Yeah, it was an experiment. What kept you in there? Because clearly you're allowed to leave, right? If you wanted to.
Yeah, I absolutely. What kept me in? I think there was Scottish stubbornness. I've committed to this, and so I'm going to do it. Although again, it's really interesting. To try and prevent that, you don't pay anything to begin with. And if you leave early, they don't accept any sort of donation. It's only if you have completed it will they accept any sort of donation, which I think is quite interesting. So they try and make it so that there's no barriers to leaving if you don't want.
No, okay.
And it stayed. But I think there was, I think, as well as the stubbornness, I was again that intrigue of, well, will it change? And a whole premise of the teachings of such a retreat is that nothing is permanent. And it's actually by being attached, or whether it be either attached or you're craving something or an aversion to something, that's what causes the pain. And if you find a way not to attach yourself, not to crave, or not to try and push something away, then you do reach an element of contentment, tranquility. And so I think for me, the retreat in itself was just such a test.
Yeah.
There were some insightful moments. There were pleasant moments within myself. So I was keen to just see almost how the experiment would end. It would just feel like, I was ending it prematurely if I stopped it.
And maybe unsurprising that you felt as you did, seeing as balance is one of your core values. Because to me, that doesn't seem extremely balanced, right? So it's perhaps unsurprising that you felt as you did. It's drawing you so far away from balance.
Yeah, no, it was really, as a trainer, there was elements at times when I had a huge amount of respect for it. I could see why they were doing what they were doing, and and it had been thought through. It's something that's literally centuries, if not millennia, in the making. This type. On the other hand, though, what I struggled with was very much the one size fits all.
Yeah.
This is the way, and like you say, it just didn't feel balanced at all, for me at least.
And so, fast forward to September when you went back to work. I'm intrigued to know how that lived up to expectation, the reflections, the feeling of you going back. But also what I'd love to know as well is, 2-3 months later we are now.
Yep.
What's changed, if anything, and whether those feelings have shifted somewhat?
Yeah. So the first, how did I feel when, what was it, the 17th of September came round and it was back to work? To be honest, I was slightly disappointed, because I was very much in that ambivalent space. It wasn't as if I was, craving going back to work. Equally, I wasn't, averse to it. But I didn't feel too much, or I didn't think too much about it. Just, okay, well, the battle come to an end. That was great. And now it's back to work. Now, maybe because I knew I was returning to specific things, I knew I had work to do, so it wasn't as if I was returning to a completely blank diary. But I didn't, and I felt, well, it would have been nice to have perhaps felt a bit more of, even if it was one or the other. So I sat with that for a while, but then actually it was a former participant of a leadership program that I delivered, who I just caught up with, and she'd read my LinkedIn article, and I was explaining to her about this concept that I just felt ambivalent. And so, well, and I felt slightly, that was a negative thing, but she said, well, no, Mark, that's really positive, because you've got non-attachment down pat. It shows that you're not too attached to your work, which is a good thing. You're not craving it, but you're not averse to it. So maybe that 10-day silent course did do something about non-attachment. Who knows? But I think that was a nice way of framing it. So yeah, although it perhaps doesn't lend itself to an amazing sabbatical podcast answer, yeah, that's the truth of it. It was just I was really comfortable going back because I'd had a great time. Yes, if somebody said, "Oh, you can have another month," and it's no problem, would I have taken it? Yes, but yeah, was I looking forward to going back? Well, yes, I was too, because I knew I had some really interesting work to return to. In terms of how I feel about it now, has anything really shifted? I do think perhaps that I suppose non-attachment to work has continued. And I think it's a constant balancing act. It is a constant challenge because my work is me. I run my own company, and so everything does start and stop with me. So it's in some ways it's often difficult to take a back seat. But it was interesting. Just over the last few weeks, I've been reflecting, I suppose, on not just the sabbatical, but my previous careers. And one of my first real kind of paid pieces of work was with one of the big international management consultancy firms, and on a piece of a client piece of work, it was just actually me. I was the sole consultant, and I was working quite closely with quite a senior client, and he was in his late 50s, 60s, and so I think he was very much dispensing his pearls of wisdom to this young, not quite spotty 20-something-year-old, but not far off. And something that he said is that Mark, I'd really urge you never to associate yourself too much with your work, because sooner or later your work will go. And if you've associated yourself too much with your work, you've got a really awkward question to ask, is that, well, who am I now that work's gone? And I think that's, it's interesting that memory has percolated up. So I think as a result, I am trying to keep that balance and ensure that other areas of my life get just as much attention as my work. I think also just practically ensuring that it's not another 20 years before I take another sabbatical.
They are addictive.
Yeah, I'm really keen to do one, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So I think it's been I think quite an easy transition, and as I say, I think from just having that, going back to that privilege, it's that sense of I feel incredibly privileged to have had the experience, and I hope it serves me well so that I can then perhaps have positive impact in other people's lives and in other ways as a result of that rest, the insights I've gained from the experience.
It does sound methodical. The intentional or not intentional, you were so clear on the why and the intention, and then building what you were doing around it. And as you mentioned, having a coach to really work through with you whether what you're going to do does serve that and serve that intention. So potentially, again, unsurprising that actually the result is that it was this beautiful sacred moment in time that you wanted, and that has solved for that rest, recharge, reconnection piece, and that you're good to go again until the next time.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Yeah, it's not an accident that you're a coach, Bex.
If you are happy, what I would love to know is, what did you value before your break that you don't value now?
Ooh. I think it's structure. I still value structure, but not to anywhere near the same extent. I think it's the sabbatical has really helped show the value of being fluid.
Love it. And I suppose on the opposite, what do you value now that you didn't before?
I think I value time in a more positive way, and recognizing that because it is finite, to really try and make the most of it. I think I've had to be quite structured and use my time effectively and efficiently, but I think it's actually valuing it to, as well as from an efficiency point of view, to actually value it.
And please share a read, watch or listen that helped you on your break, or just generally has changed your life.
So the one that I would read is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Time Management for Mortals. I read a kind of a preview of it before my sabbatical, and then I read it during my sabbatical. And the essence of it is, because essentially the title, you a typical life has 4,000 weeks.
Yeah, wow.
So given that, this finite time, how are you going to make the most of it? And I think a lot of people take the view of, kind of obsessing about kind of lengthening it, trying to, well, if I can be more efficient and then that's a productive life. But I think he actually tries to give a different perspective of, it's not about doing more and trying to fill that time with stuff. There is time for just being.
Yeah, love it. And your top 3 tips for anybody thinking about taking a sabbatical or currently, on one, what would they be?
So I think tip number 1, I initially wrote down, don't compare. But let me flip that to something more positive, is be individual. I think a lot of people I've spoken to say, I can't take a sabbatical because, it's too much money. I don't have that amount of time. Yes, absolutely. It's privileged. I'm somebody who earns roughly, the average annual salary in the UK. So it's not, I don't earn, so my discretionary income isn't massive, but you can, and things that I did, yes, there were some costs associated with it, but and other things, there wasn't actually a huge amount of cost associated with it. So I think be individual, structure your sabbatical to fit you, not what you perceive you need to have in sabbatical, whether it be I can't afford to take a around the world trip. Well, why do you have to do that? That might be for some, but not for you. So I think just be individual and work out what would be most valuable for you and avoid comparison. 2, even if you don't go to the extreme that I do, don't check emails. Take a real email detox. Really unplug. And then I think the third one, which is linked to the fluidity, is really just listen to your body during the sabbatical. There were times when I had certain things planned, but I thought, I'm feeling still quite tired from the last thing. I'm just going to put that back. This wasn't the week that I'd allocated to just rest and potter around, but you know what? I think this is the best week for that. So I think just really being fluid, really try and listen to your body. What does it want? Listen to the whisper of your body, because often your logic will shout at you. The rational brain will be shouting at you, but that intuitive part of you, it whispers mainly. Just allowing that to be heard and just listen to that. And
Love it. Thank you so much. Wonderful tips. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. What an amazing story. And if anybody is keen to, reach out or get in touch, where's the best place to find you? Not on Facebook.
Well, I am on LinkedIn. And so, yes, Mark Hughes on LinkedIn, or my company is mchpositiveimpact.com. So by all means, my details are there. And yes, if anyone wants to chat about sabbaticals or indeed anything else, very happy to connect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Bex. Really nice talking to you.
Search wide, enjoy your climb. It's all for you. Deep down, you've tried deep.
Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thanks to Mark for sharing his story. It's an insight into how taking time away isn't always about a dramatic pivot. Sometimes it's just about curiosity, reflection, and seeing your work with fresh eyes. If you'd like to connect with Mark, you can find him via the links in the show notes. As always, a special thank you to Auntie Bea at the Flaxen, my incredible, patient and talented producer. To Nikki Sweetland, our brilliant creative force behind all things social and visual. And to Joe Cook, whose soulful vocals we're so lucky to feature throughout the show. If you've loved this episode and know somebody who'd maybe love it too, please do send it their way, share the link, pop it in a group chat, or forward it to that friend who's always talking about taking a sabbatical. And please do us a massive favour, hit follow, give the show a rating, or leave a quick review. It generally does make a huge difference and helps more people discover these powerful sabbatical stories. The more we share them, the more we normalise taking brave, intentional breaks. And if you've got a story of your own, or maybe you know someone who does, please do reach out. I'm Bex Thomas on LinkedIn, and we're Sabbatical Stories Podcast on Instagram. Until next time, take care of yourself, keep dreaming big, and remember, your sabbatical story might just be waiting to be written.
Search wide.